Cinderella. You know her. You love her. She's the OG. She's like so OG that she saved the Disney company back in the days. She is the OG. And I don't think she is necessarily a lot of people's favorites. Correct me if I'm wrong. But I don't think she is like the most hated princess ever. She's just there. You know, she's a little higher than average, but she's there. And that's great. Good for her. I think she could move a little bit up the scale. Because after doing some research, I was reminded about how much Cinderella is a boss and a queen. And honestly, underappreciated. So today we are here to appreciate my queen. Basically, the gist is, if you've been following me for long enough, you know I have a tendency to post on my Instagram stories quite a lot. That's kind of my whole thing. Like, while I was at college, people knew me as Asian Galaxy Girl because of how much I posted on my stories. I don't know whether to take that as a compliment or not, but here we are. Anyways, I just have this thing of like posting whatever comes to mind. Most of the time that ends up being rants about who knows what, and sometimes that could be things like posting photos of my cute dog, or me ranting about how insufferably annoying my dog is. No, kidding. It could be posting photos of my dog, or me just ranting about how insufferably annoying it is, yet rewarding it is to be a writer. Point is, I like talking, and oftentimes I like doing commentaries on movies because I have a tendency to analyze movies or just stories in general from an author's perspective. I know that doesn't sound like a lot. I don't think it's a lot, but here we are anyways. And so today we are going to be talking about Cinderella. You know her, you love her. She's like the OG. By the way, I am joined here today by lovely Sir Baymax, who is rocking this t-shirt that says "Believe in your #selfie." I did not put this on him. He's been wearing this for years, but who knows, maybe he needs a change of style. But today I'm here to talk about why Cinderella is actually a well-written, strong female protagonist, and how writers, authors, anyone who wants to see such a display of a strong female character can look to Cinderella, who you wouldn't imagine to be an example of that, but actually is, and I'm here to break down why. The story of Cinderella is extremely popular, like so popular that there have been many adaptations of her story. I like to joke around that you can see these movies called Another Cinderella Story. I would add on that they need to add yet another Cinderella story because there are so many adaptations. But there are definitely some better adaptations than others. We will get to that later on. And while I think it's cool that there are so many modern day adaptations of the Cinderella story, I think a lot of them miss out on the actual theme behind the Cinderella story, which is why some are definitely better than others, and others just have a tendency to divert way more off the road. But after binge watching several Cinderella adaptations, I am here to explain why there are 3 important characteristics to a good Cinderella adaptation. Number 1 being theme. There always has a tendency to be the theme of the underdog, the person who you never expected to rise out of their ranks, because that's kind of what Cinderella is, you know, a rags to riches story. And that kind of story is very motivating, very inspiring. Some Cinderella adaptations have a tendency to divert away from that underdog story. We'll get to that later on. But the thing is, I feel like theme is a very important characteristic in the Cinderella story, simply because it's one of the biggest things that stands out about it in comparison to maybe Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs or Sleeping Beauty. There, the theme is a lot more deeper, or not really there as much. The second thing I would say that is important in the Cinderella adaptation is the romance. But you might be saying, Josie, what do you mean about romance? There is no romance in the first Cinderella adaptation because they instantly go from seeing each other one night to marriage the next day. And to that, I would say yes, but also no. One of the biggest criticisms about Cinderella, which is very valid, is the fact that they somehow meet each other in one night and are practically married the next day. And yes, I can totally understand how that can be very jarring because even in the original Cinderella story, there are only 3 nights which they know each other, which isn't that much better. I guess it's better than a night, but still. And that's why I think the whole idea behind the romance of the Cinderella story is that the romance is not the main part of the story. Unfortunately, I think a lot of modern day adaptations have a tendency to make the romance the pivotal focus of the movie, which is kind of annoying because that's actually not the main focus in the original Cinderella stories. But because they do make the romance the main focus in these adaptations, I think it's absolutely fair for us to judge whether they can convince you that you can find love at first sight. Because I think oftentimes people have a tendency to put our reality onto these movies when these movies are simply supposed to transport you to a place where love at first sight can totally be a real thing. And I think some movies pull that off really well, and you feel that they have a really good connection even though they've only known each other for very little time. And other movies, not so much. You can tell that it is definitely forced in there, which is a bummer, to say the least. And the third most important thing in the Cinderella adaptations is the characters. Mostly Cinderella, because the character of Cinderella oftentimes has a tendency to change depending on what the movies need, which is a little unfortunate, having to sacrifice what makes Cinderella Cinderella to make it more entertaining. But I get it, respect. But I think in the character of the prince and the stepmother, because some movies definitely make the prince more interesting. Other times they make him look like a lousy guy. And certain movies make the stepmother really intimidating, because technically she is an abuser. And other movies, not so much. And it's kind of disappointing because it is just very jarring when the evil stepmother is not necessarily borderline evil. We'll get to it later on. I think you have an idea of the movie that I'm talking about. But before we get into all the messiness that is the adaptations, let's talk about the original Grimm fairy tale. In the original Cinderella story written by the Brothers Grimm, in the original Grimm fairy tale, there are some distinct differences. For one, Cinderella goes to the festival, the ball, whatever you want to call it, 3 times, and she meets the prince there every single time. 2, there is no fairy godmother. She just was added on later on. So, yeah, actually in the original Grimm fairy tale, it's a tree that gives her everything. So I guess I get why they chose a fairy godmother instead of a tree. The tree doesn't even talk, it's just a tree. A magical tree apparently, but just a tree. Also, one of the big notable differences is that Cinderella's father is actually alive in the original stories. Yes, he is alive. And he's kind of a jerk because he knows that his stepwife is doing all of this to his daughter. I have questions about that, but I guess the Brothers Grimm can't answer those for me, so here we are. And personally, I would say that the original animated Disney Cinderella adaptation from 1950 actually follows the theme and morals of the original Cinderella story quite well. There's still that inspiration that Cinderella portrays, that she is still kind and good to everyone around her, even though she's been living in an abusive household for years and years. I think the thing that modern day adaptations try to fix is the fact that Cinderella doesn't save herself. When in reality, a lot of abuse survivors can empathize with Cinderella in that you feel like you have no way out. And it's either she continues to live in this household or she has to suffer outside because there's no one to take care of her. That's something I didn't make up because in the animated Cinderella, she has that agency. She knows that she cannot afford to live out on her own. She even says that to Bruno the dog because the dog was having a dream about chasing Lucifer the cat, and she tells him, you shouldn't do that, you should get rid of that dream because otherwise you will be kicked out of the house. And that's a very similar thing for her. She knows that if she were to disobey too many times, she'll be kicked out of the house and she has no way to live other than living under her stepmother, which is absolutely awful, but that was the reality she was living in. It's not that she didn't try to save herself, she had no way. And another thing that I will argue the modern adaptations fail to realize is that Cinderella was not pining for the prince. That's like the biggest thing about her, is that she simply wanted a night away. She wanted to not have to be Cinderella. She wanted to be able to be with other people who wouldn't judge her for the way she looked. And she just wanted a night out on the town to just be herself and just enjoy herself, you know? In comparison to literally everyone in the kingdom who was wanting to marry the prince simply for the fact that they would become a princess, Cinderella is more focused on the fact that it's a ball. A once in a lifetime opportunity, and girl, I feel you. I would be more focused on that ball rather than that prince, because what are the chances the prince is gonna see me? Like, I totally get that. But that's her thing. She doesn't even mention the prince most of the time. She's just talking about how she wants to go to the ball, while her stepsisters and her stepmother are talking about how they can possibly become the future queen. Which is kind of why Cinderella is in the end rewarded for her goodness, her kindness. She didn't have any ill intent when she was going to meet the prince. She didn't even realize that it was the prince. Can you tell this bothers me? Like, I'm mildly annoyed just the fact that they're always like, oh, she just wants the prince. Like, no. She was even dancing with the prince the entire night and didn't even realize that he was the prince. She's like, oh, I think the prince could not match the handsomeness of this guy that I was dancing with that will only last the night. Like, she was thinking that it was like a great dream that was just going to end and then her life would be the way it was for the rest of it. She just wanted a night away. She got that night away. Then she was also rewarded with a handsome prince who swept her away and provided her a life that she no longer had to live in an abusive household. It was a reward. I think this is one of the biggest reasons why Cinderella is so underrated and why she's actually a very strong character, is because she may not seem like she has a lot of agency, but she knows when to take the right opportunity. Like, for example, at the very end when she was locked away by her stepmother, she roused up the help of all of these animals that have cared for her and loved her, and she has also loved and cared for them too. And she's like, oh, get Bruno so then he can scare Lucifer the cat, so then we can get the key and I can escape. Like, she takes that opportunity. She doesn't just sit around and wait and realize, oh, there is nothing left for me, I just have to wait for my prince. Like, no, there's not much she can do because she's locked inside the attic, but she does something. Anyways, so those are my biggest things. That's why I think Cinderella is completely underrated. But now we are going to move on to the movie adaptations that fail to portray Cinderella as a strong female character, the way that she should be portrayed. The underlining thing about Cinderella's character is that she is most definitely a victim of abuse, but she is not a damsel in distress. She is not waiting around for someone to save her. She is simply waiting for the right opportunity to align so that she can save herself. And that comes, yes, through the form of the prince, but that was also a reward for her behavior, for her kindness and goodness. I'm not going to talk about every single Cinderella adaptation. That would take way too long, and I just also do not want to do that. But we are going to talk about the worst, the middle, and the best of all the Cinderella adaptations. And for the worst, I don't think anyone is surprised, but the 2021 Cinderella adaptation by Amazon Prime. What was that? It was a mess, to say for sure. I think it was one of the most confusing movies. I don't know if I would go as far as to say hated movies. It was just, people were like, what the heck is this and why do we need it? There are a lot of reasons as to why this adaptation failed on so many parts, but we're going to talk about, again, the three things with the theme, the romance, and the character. Let's first talk about the theme. I would say the theme is definitely be yourself and follow your dreams, and you know, that kind of inspirational gut punching thing. Yeah, that doesn't work in this movie. In fact, I find that the original Cinderella did a much better version of following your dreams. I don't get the whole be yourself thing because I don't think that necessarily fits the Cinderella story to begin with. It's kind of just shoved in there. Basically, in this movie, Cinderella is a dressmaker. She wants to become a famous dressmaker. She wants to be a businesswoman selling her dresses, and for whatever reason, she lives in a super misogynistic kingdom that says, no, women can't be businesswomen. I'm not gonna lie, I was very confused because people were always shaming her for sewing and stuff like that, but I'm like, were the men sewing? Where were you getting your clothes? Why weren't women able to sell their dresses and their clothes beforehand? Like, what is the logic? Why would it not make sense for a woman to sew when sewing was, you know, back in the day, a very feminine kind of hobby? Why does it not make any sense for women to sell their sewing? I don't get it. Why? Seriously, like, if people are constantly shaming Cinderella for following her dreams and trying to be a businesswoman, but why? Genuinely, I do not get it. She just wants to be a dressmaker. It's not like she wants to be the next queen. And after something where she's like, you know, being very witty, the prince sees her, falls in love with her for honestly no reason, and then invites her to come to the ball that he's hosting because his parents insist on him finding a wife. She goes to the ball, but not for a night away. Not because she wants to marry the prince, but because she wants to meet all the rich people who would give her the opportunity to sell her dresses. And I'm like, okay, cool. I get it. Opportunity is there, you know, like seize the moment kind of thing. So yeah, cool, I get it. But then the prince finds her, dances with her, and like, since he already knew her from before, he's like, oh, I'm in love with you, you know, you're so witty, you're so charming, you're so... Okay. He says, will you marry me? And she says no, because then I can't sell my dresses, even though she would be the queen, and then she could still just sew and still sell her dresses. What is the logic? If he's king, he can change the rules for you. Also, still do not understand why women were shamed for selling dresses. Anyways, it's this whole thing, and then eventually Cinderella gets forced into a marriage because the stepmother wants her to marry this really creepy guy, to be honest. And then instead of doing that, she goes because there's this queen who wants to buy her clothes and, you know, make her the official dressmaker or whatever. And the prince goes to help her follow her dreams because guess what? He gave up his line to the throne. He sort of... Basically, the king went, I realize that you just don't want to be king, and your younger sister here is way more capable at being queen than you are. Even though the king for most of the movie was very, very, very sexist and was like, I'm the king, so I can do whatever I want. And oh my gosh, I have so many issues with this movie, could you tell? And at the end of the day, Cinderella both gets the prince and she gets to follow her dreams. Good for her. That was a very loose idea of why the movie sucks. But let's go into the three main things, the main characteristics a Cinderella adaptation should have, and why this movie failed. Number one, the theme. The theme was like, be yourself and follow your dreams and all of that inspiring thing. But it lacked any of that inspiration in this movie. It just fell flat. And I think the theme fell flat for two reasons. One, the whole thing about follow your dreams. Okay, cool. I get how that can coincide with the whole Cinderella story of, you know, rags to riches, you know, like moving up in the world, underdog kind of thing. But in reality, I feel like most of the movie, she is always being encouraged to follow her dream, yet she doesn't really do a lot to actually pursue her dreams. She's always helped on by other people. For example, the prince buys her first dress. He also invites her to the ball where she meets this queen who says, "Hey, will you be my official dressmaker?" The prince literally set that all up for her. Also, later on, before the ball, she was wearing this dress that she had sewn herself. You know, she was gonna go to the ball and meet this queen, and her stepmother ruins the dress with ink. Like, nothing much, it was just ink. And instead of, using her super dressmaking skills to fix it, she could have altered it somehow and made it a statement piece. But instead of that, the fairy godmother, fairy god person, whatever, comes down from the sky and is like, "I will make your wishes come true," and then gives her a dress. Yes, the dress is technically her design, but still, he made it for her. She didn't make it herself. It's not like it was a backup dress. It's not like she altered anything about her dress to make it look like that dress. And even in the very end, when she's escaping that sort of arranged marriage with the creepy guy, she is helped by the prince to bring her to town so she can meet the queen and agree to be the official dressmaker. She does nothing to actually follow her dreams. There's definitely that intent. She wants to follow her dreams, but it's not followed through because it doesn't seem like she actually does a lot of actions to make sure that her dreams actually happen. Which I think contradicts the theme. Because yes, you can follow your dreams, you can want to do that, but if you don't put in the effort and the actions to do so, you are going to go nowhere. If you want something, you can't just ask for it and it'll be handed to you. You can't just rely on other people helping you and stuff like that. And even then, there's no real reason why the other people are helping her other than the prince is an absolute simp for this girl. Also, the second thing with the whole theme of be yourself, I don't get it, mostly because I don't think that it falls in line with the whole Cinderella story to begin with. That was never the kind of theme or implications from the original story. Her whole thing is being yourself means being a dressmaker. Again, kind of coincides with the whole follow your dreams. She doesn't actually put a lot of effort in to be an authentic businesswoman the way that she wants to be, the way that is her true self. That, and also the prince, contradicts this theme absolutely completely. The whole appeal to this modern adaptation of Cinderella is the fact that, oh look, she doesn't actually end up becoming queen, she still gets to follow her dreams. Yet guess what? The prince is still a simp. He does absolutely nothing. It's implied that he kind of wants to be king, but also kind of doesn't want to be king. And in the end, he isn't ending up as king. His little sister ends up being the next queen. This guy seems to have no desire for anything other than Cinderella. It's actually kind of toxic, I would say, that you have this guy who seems to make his only personality the fact that he's in love. I don't understand why they didn't give the prince some other desire that he may want other than Cinderella. Like, he could have been interested in something else. And the king was like, no, why do you want to do that? You have to be king. And he's like, I don't want to be king. I want to follow my dreams. And you could have had this parallel story with Cinderella, but no. He doesn't seem to want anything other than Cinderella, so much so that he's willing to bend the earth and heavens just to have her. It's not great. And I think the prince character, if anything, absolutely contradicts the whole theme to begin with. So I don't know what they were trying to achieve, because he doesn't follow his dream. He has no dream. His only dream is Cinderella. That's his only personality trait, and it's awful. And I feel so bad for him, because what happens when he loses Cinderella for good? Or if he were to, what if Cinderella actually rejected him and was like, no, I don't want to be with you? Then what? What does he have after that? He has nothing. It's like they decided to make a feminist movie, but they only made the females in the movie have actual desires, and that passion to pursue what they love, while as the guys don't. And that's not great, because everyone should have some kind of identity outside of another person, because that's not necessarily a healthy relationship. Okay, now we're moving on to the romance, which there is none. I think out of all the adaptations, this couple seems to have the least amount of romantic chemistry I have ever seen, and it hurts internally, inside. And the thing is, I don't necessarily blame the actors, because I think they just did with what they had, and the script ended up being really flat, and it sucks. Like, it's so cringy. Because again, you sort of have this thing where the prince is pining after Cinderella so much, but it doesn't seem like Cinderella is that interested. And honestly, there is no real reason as to why she ends up with him at the end. If anything, it would have been better if she just didn't end up with him and did her own thing, and that was her sort of escape from the abusive household. For one thing, there's no real reason as to why either of them should be interested in the other person. The thing that catches the prince's eyes about Cinderella is that she was like climbing this statue during the changing of the guards, and the king was like, "Get off!" And she was just like, you know, you should totally have bleachers in the back for short people. And you know, she was just trying to be witty and stuff like that, and it fell flat because it seemed weird. It seemed forced. Oh my gosh, it really... And like I said, there was no reason why Cinderella was interested in the prince. She just wanted to sell her dresses. She didn't even look for marriage. She was just like, I want to be a businesswoman, and honestly, respect. But there's no reason why she ended up with the prince. There's no romance, no chemistry. It's sort of like they pushed these two together and they're like, here, now kiss. Which is unfortunately what happens in some movies and some books. Is just like the author or the writer feels like they need to include a romance of some sort, and so they sort of force these two characters together even though they don't really have any reason to be attracted to each other. It makes no sense. I'm confused, I'm confuzzled, I question everything, I question my entire existence because of this movie. I'm just kidding. Point is, nothing. There's nothing. Zilch. Nada. No reason as to why these two, like, you know, in a wedding ceremony where whoever is ordaining the marriage is like, if anyone should have any reason why these two shouldn't be together, if anyone had any reason why Cinderella and Prince Charming shouldn't be together, it's that they have nothing. There is nothing there why they should be together. I don't get it. It confuses me so much. Anyways, moving on to the next and last thing, which is the characters. Whew, this is a topic. The characters in this movie are very two-dimensional. You can tell that the writers really intended there to be motivation behind, for example, Cinderella and the stepmother. Not really for the Prince Charming, which, you know, sucks for him, but they really tried to give both of them more of a motivation within the story, but it doesn't work because their motivation is not expanded upon. There's nothing more than, this is my identity, and that's it. And that sucks because that's not good characterization. A character should feel realistic because they have more than one thing as their identity. For Cinderella, it's like, I'm a dressmaker. And for the stepmother, it's kind of like, I want to make sure that my girls are rich and don't have to worry about working in their lives. Like, okay, respect, but still, I feel like I've already covered why Cinderella as a character in this movie does not work, because she just doesn't have any, well, she definitely has motivation, she just doesn't put any of the effort in, and everyone else does it for her. That, and also they try to make it so then apparently her being sassy and witty and kind of outspoken is why she's a strong female character, when that's not true. You can still be a strong female without needing to know what to say all the time. Like, why can't we have a Cinderella that's more of an introvert, who's still strong? Because guess what? She doesn't need to be witty to be strong. That's a number one thing. If you are trying to write a female character who is a strong-willed woman, she doesn't need to be witty. She doesn't need to be sassy. She doesn't need to know what to say at every moment. She just needs to be secure in herself. And I would say that this Cinderella is not. She definitely has the motivations. She knows what she wants, but she doesn't really put in the effort to go after them. And it kind of sucks. The stepmother is very interesting in this movie because she's not really an evil stepmother. She's just sort of there. She just exists. There's nothing really to her other than the fact that she pressures Cinderella into an arranged marriage because she wants apparently Cinderella's dowry or whatever. Like, there's no real reason she gives as to why she forces Cinderella into this arranged marriage. I mean, her whole logic is, I want to do it for you. Because apparently she's given this tragic backstory where she tried pursuing her dreams as being this great piano player, and in the end she lost her husband who left her because how dare she have desires and a hobby and something outside of being a mother and a wife. I'll give them credit for trying, and I mean trying, to make an interesting backstory with the evil stepmother, but they really failed because she doesn't feel intimidating. She doesn't feel like she has a lot of power over Cinderella's life. And in the end, they sort of try to give her a redemption arc because then Cinderella forgives her, even though, one, the evil stepmother did not really seem that sorry for what she did. There doesn't seem to be a lot of motivation for what she did to Cinderella, but also she didn't do that much bad to Cinderella. She just forced her into an arranged marriage. Which, yes, that sucks, but that didn't end up happening. Like, in the end, Cinderella doesn't end up doing most of the work most of the time. In fact, you see more scenes of the stepmother and the stepsisters, like, doing their own clothes and washing them and line drying them and whatever. You see more footage of that than you see Cinderella serving them. There's only one time when she just serves them tea and serves them breakfast or whatever. And the other times, she's just sewing. You would think that the stepmother would, make her do more chores so she can't sew. Like, that would make way more sense if she was just forced to constantly work her butt off and didn't have enough time to sew anything that she wanted. But no, Cinderella has time to make a whole freaking dress for the ball. The evil stepmother is not evil in this movie, and take it as you want. If you don't want her to be evil, okay, then they achieved that in this movie. But if they were trying to make her intimidating, they failed. Very much so. Also, I'll be super brief about this, but the prince has no personality. He has nothing other than being a simp for Cinderella. And that's awful. I feel absolutely bad for him because he doesn't seem to have any desire for anything in this world other than Cinderella. Like, even in the movie, they talk about the fact that they think the prince is lazy and not as good as his younger sister, because like his younger sister sometimes pops into the screen and like talks about how she has these plans for, oh, can I talk about how I want to make reusable energy or whatever, or like his sister was clearly a better fit for queen because she had better plans as to why they can improve the economy and stuff like that. Like, she goes, oh, why are we still using catapults when we don't really need them and stuff like that. And the king always shuts her down because he's super sexist even towards his daughter. But the fact is, there was a rumor in the movie, in the town, that the prince was less capable than his younger sister. And yes, that was true. His younger sister is definitely more capable at being queen, or at least being a really, really good advisor. But it doesn't seem like the prince had much to give up or sacrifice for Cinderella. Like, yes, I guess his whole thing was following his dream was apparently not having to be king, but it didn't seem like it was that difficult to give up. Like, and don't get me started on the king. The king sort of went from a 180 because he was super misogynistic for most of the movie, and then his wife criticizes him this one time, and then now he's like, oh, now my daughter is going to be queen, and you, my prince, you can do whatever the heck you want, which is apparently traveling with this girl that you just met. The king also has a really weird motivation where he wants this arranged marriage between the prince and the princess of a different country because he apparently wants access to this sea monster. It's never explained as to why. Like, the king and the prince are just so out there because they seem goofy, they seem lousily written, and I just feel sorry because that's not the kind of inspiration that anyone should be getting from this kind of movie. Like, I get it, Cinderella is the main character. She should be the one that people look to for inspiration. But they really tried to give the prince some kind of plot line, and they totally had the capabilities to give him an inspirational plot line too. You know, to make it so then maybe Cinderella chasing her dreams inspires him to do more and to actually pick up a hobby other than hunting and drinking, apparently. There is this one line where the prince is like, "Oh, Cinderella, you inspired me to follow my dreams, which means that I get to be me." What is there to you? What is there to him that is somehow better than him being a prince and in line to the throne? Again, do not get it. This movie frustrates me to no end because it seems like they tried, but it failed so miserably. And I just feel sorry for the cast, for the writers, for everyone involved with this movie, because I don't know if it necessarily had the potential to be a great movie, but it had the potential to be a better movie than it was. And it was not, and it's sad. So yeah, RIP to Cinderella 2021, I guess. Now we're moving on to the middle of the bar. You know, it's not great, but it's also not bad. And that would be the 2015 live-action Cinderella by Disney. I think it was okay. I know a lot of people seem to really like the movie. I'll admit, when I first watched it back in the theaters, when theaters were a thing, no, I'm kidding, I came out from that movie feeling kind of disappointed, mostly because Maleficent had come out like the year before or something like that, and I was expecting there to be this really fun twist to the original Cinderella story that would have made it slightly more interesting and, you know, not copying and pasting. There was a little bit of that in that they made it so the Duke was also kind of a villain in the story, but it didn't work that great. So in the end, the movie kind of copy and paste from the original animated Cinderella, except it leaves out the really, really good parts about the animated Cinderella that stands out. I will just say that this movie kind of disappointed me. You know, I thought it had potential to be revolutionary for the Cinderella stories, but it kind of just did the same thing as everyone else. That's why I put it at middle, you know? It's just there. So let's talk about the first thing, which is theme. And if you have never watched this movie, the theme is boldly stated many, many, many times, which is have courage and be kind. That is something the mother tells Cinderella. That is something Cinderella tells herself many times. That's something that is just forced down your throat throughout the entire movie. And I would say this is the biggest flaw with this movie, is that it tells you that this is the theme of the movie instead of showing you that is the theme of the movie. If you are into writing, you know the rule, show, don't tell. And basically it's the idea that if you want to show that your character is nervous, you describe what the anxiety is doing to them, you know? Like you describe them stuttering or them starting to fidget with their hands or something like that. You don't just say, he was nervous. That doesn't convey anything. It just sounds boring. It's just bland, and you're just telling the readers what they should know or what they should feel, you know? You aren't pulling the readers in with any kind of emotions or telling them these are the emotions that they're feeling and maybe you should feel the same way. Like you're just telling them, you should feel this way. It's like shoved in your face. It's a lot. So that's my biggest issue with this movie, is that it tells you so many times the theme of the movie is have courage and be kind. But I feel like you don't see that very much within the movie or within Cinderella herself. Actually, I don't think there are many times when Cinderella in this movie has a chance to have courage. I guess there's one time when she saves this deer or whatever from being chased, and she tries to protect it, and the prince's hunting party comes, and she stands up to him and is like, why are you chasing this poor animal? I guess that's courage. She doesn't even stand up to the stepmother that much. Like, she just sort of exists. And I think that's the thing with Cinderella's character, is she sort of just exists in this movie, you know? And also the thing of being kind. I don't think we see that too much. I mean, I guess with her animal friends, but I feel like they achieved that a lot better in animated movies, because for example, you see Cinderella save Gus Gus from the mousetrap, you see her save all her mice friends from Lucifer the cat quite a few times. Like, there are more examples of her being kind in the animated version than there are in the live action version. It's just implied heavily that Cinderella is courageous and kind, which doesn't work because we, the audience, are not convinced that Cinderella is courageous and kind if we do not see that she is courageous and kind. Moving on to the romance, which, is there any kind of romantic chemistry? Yes? No? I would lean more towards no, because they don't really convince me that love at first sight can actually happen. Like, Prince Kit and Cinderella's first interaction happens when Cinderella stops him from killing this stag while they're on this sort of hunting thing. And apparently that's what the prince finds interesting about her. Like, he seems so enamored with her, but we aren't really convincingly given a reason as to why. I mean, other than the fact that these two are drop dead gorgeous, and I get that. There's that physical attraction, but still, it seems like he's like interested in her personality, but they only talk for like 5 minutes. So I would say that there's definitely something. Like, the writers really tried, and I think I can see their efforts with this. I just don't feel like they nailed the landing with this one, and that it feels like you can convincingly believe in their romance. It's just sort of like, yeah, I mean, I guess. I think one of my favorite things about the original animated Cinderella was the fact that, 1, the prince and Cinderella did not meet beforehand. 2, Cinderella isn't aware that the prince is a prince, even during the ball, even while she's dancing with him. Not aware that he is the prince until way after. And 3, it convinces you that love at first sight can be real, and it's romantic and beautiful. You got Cinderella and Prince Charming singing, so this is love, and it feels like Cinderella has finally realized what love feels like, you know, other than the love from her parents, I guess. I don't know, there's just something about that where it convinces you that that kind of romance can be real, even though probably in real life that would fail miserably. But this movie just doesn't cut it for me, you know? Like, they tried, I can see their efforts, but... And lastly, we're going to talk about the characters. I'm mostly going to be focusing on Cinderella and the evil stepmother, played by the beautiful, gorgeous Cate Blanchett. Mostly because the prince, again, does not seem to have that much personality other than simping for Cinderella, you know? He's kind of funny and quirky, I guess, a little bit. You can see sort of why Cinderella would have fallen for him, because he's very charming. Also kind of tragic is that he loses his dad in the movie. He becomes king before the very end of the movie. And he's like, I'm gonna find this girl. Like, it doesn't seem like he spends any time mourning over the fact that he is now an orphan and the king of this kingdom. He's sort of just like, time to find my wife. Okay, but first, with Cinderella, I think they did a good enough job with her. There are definitely moments that stand out where you can see her being kind, and so I can see why the theme of kindness is a bit more prevalent in this movie than, in other adaptations. You can see why she's sort of rewarded for her kindness, but also, again, with the theme, she doesn't seem to have any reason to be courageous, so that doesn't make any sense. The kindness thing, I can get it. I can see that. For example, she's kind to her mice friends, and also she saves this stag from being killed. And the fairy godmother kind of does this Beauty and the Beast thing with the enchantress, where she's sort of like this ugly old woman at first, and then once Cinderella gives her a cup of water to drink from, then she emerges and is like, okay, time to grant all your wishes, I definitely think they tried to stay true towards the animated version in showing more of Cinderella's kindness. It just, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Again, I will also say, not much of a reason for Cinderella to be courageous, like the movie's theme constantly shoves down your throat. But overall, this Cinderella is not that bad. Not the best, but she is definitely further up in the list than some other Cinderellas. Now let's talk about the evil stepmother, played by the gorgeous Cate Blanchett. I thought that this evil stepmother was definitely evil, I definitely don't think that this stepmother was sort of as abusive or cold and menacing as the animated version is, but this one definitely hits the mark for being mean, and it works. I thought the evil stepmother was really interesting for trying to team up with the Duke, so then her daughters would at least marry wealthy, which seems to be the motivation of a lot of stepmothers, is that so that their daughter will marry wealthy, which is kind of why she married Cinderella's dad to begin with, so then she'd be well off, which I get. One thing that I didn't appreciate about Cinderella, though, was her sort of passive state at the very end of the movie. It's like she sort of just gave up on life and sat on this windowsill in the attic and just sang. Like, there wasn't that much to it, which kind of disappointed me, I'm not gonna lie, mostly because in the original movie, she tries to recruit her animal friends to, get the key, scare away Lucifer, so then she can escape out of the attic and come down, to try on the glass slipper. But in this movie, no, she just sits there and sings, and she's got a pretty voice, but it just seemed very passive, It seemed like up until now, we have seen that she is willing to do things, but it's sort of like she just gave up, even though the opportunity is right there, right at the very bottom. And if anything, the mice opened the window for her. It's not that the window was too far away, the window was right there, and she could have easily opened it and yelled for help or done something. She could have just screamed, "I'm in here, come save me," or something. She could have been active and tried to get the attention of the guards and the Duke downstairs, so then she would have a chance to try on the glass slipper. But no, the mice are what do it for her. The mice open the window, she's just singing because she's singing for no reason really, and then the guard is like, "Hey, that sounds like another person," and then lo and behold, the prince is amongst them, and he's like, "Duke, I think that you should find out who that person is," Okay, last but not least, we're going to talk about the best of the best Cinderella adaptations. And of course, that would have to be Ever After from 1998. And that movie is it is gorgeous, it's beautiful, it's compelling. It feels like a Cinderella story while also feeling like an original story. And I love it. It's great. I've asked several people in the past, I'm like, which Cinderella adaptation is your favorite? And people always come back to Ever After. It's just that good. I'm sure if you're watching this movie, you are betting on Ever After being the best Cinderella adaptation, and you are correct. This movie does an interesting and unique thing in that it sets the movie in Renaissance era France and acts as if what if Cinderella were actually a real story, and it just, takes some creative liberty. Like, for example, Leonardo da Vinci is actually the godmother in this case, mostly because he provides Danielle, Cinderella, a way to go to the ball and inspires her to do that. I would say one of the themes of the movie definitely is love, because you can feel how genuine it is between the couple. There was a really good build up towards it, and so it feels like, yeah, you can totally see them being a real life couple. It's cute, it's adorable, it's heartwarming. If you've never watched this movie, I highly recommend you go watch it first, because you just gotta experience it for yourself. Like, just take my word for it. It's great. You'll love it. I hope. And like I said, the romance is real. It feels real, because basically, if you've forgotten what the movie was like, or if you never watched it before, basically they meet on accident at first, with the prince trying to run away from his duties because his dad is trying to enforce him to marry the Princess of Spain, even though he doesn't want to, because, well, mostly just because he doesn't want to deal with his princely duties, There's also this build-up because they actually get to know each other for a really long time before the ball actually happens. If anything, the ball is kind of the climactic moment. I think the biggest reason why their romance works is because there's a good build-up to it. They get to know each other and inspire each other long before the ball actually happens. And I think it's great. I think it works. Again, I don't think it necessarily follows the exact Cinderella storyline, but I think it works in this case, because the most encouraging thing is that Cinderella, or Danielle, encourages the prince to become a better person. She encourages him to open a university, to actually pursue reading and stuff like that, because that's the kind of influence her father had on her. And I think it's great. I think it's beautiful. You can see that Danielle is a bit of an outspoken person, not like the sassy, witty type. She's intelligent. She knows how to ask for things, and she's willing to stand up for the right things. Like, for example, one of the earliest scenes of kindness that we see is one of her old-time family servants is sort of like sold away and is separated from his wife, and Danielle, using the money that she has, goes to try and buy him back because, old friend, she loves him, and also she wants him to be reunited with, sort of his family. And she is like talking up to this basically slave trader who is like, get in line, blah blah blah, and stuff like that. And she's not rude, she's just outspoken. She intelligently explains why this is wrong, and the prince sees this and is attracted to her intelligence, And I think that's why this one works, is that he's attracted to the fact that she was willing to stand up for this. She is clearly intelligent and smart and witty and not sassy. I mean, she is kind of sassy, but like, that's not her main characteristic. That's not her identity. And I think the whole build-up kind of thing works really well, which is why the betrayal also like cuts deep into you, you know what I mean? Because you understand why the prince is like upset at Danielle, but also you understand why Danielle wants to actually be with him. It's not like she was trying to deceive him. Like, it's just, it's so good. Anyways, point is, their relationship is totally believable, and I think the reason why is because the two of them encourage each other. I would say especially more with Danielle and the prince. She encourages him to be a better man, to step up to his duties as prince and the future king, and that really comes through. This is all sort of jumbled, I'll admit, just because it's all really well connected, the theme, the romance, the characters, and that's part of good writing. It's when everything connects so well together. It's beautiful. And like, I've already talked about how Danielle's kindness is portrayed, she cares deeply about other people, especially the ones closest to her. She encourages others to stand up for what's right, to be a better version of themselves, and that's what is inspirational. This sounds a little weird, but think about superheroes, right? We find superheroes to be absolutely inspirational when they are kicked down, when they are in the dirt, but they stand up anyways. They have the courage to do what's right, even though they are not guaranteed to win, you know? And that's why Danielle is so inspiring. She is willing to stand up for what's right, even though at one point she gets whipped by her stepmother. Like, literally whipped. She's being physically and emotionally abused. Yet she is still strong in her opinions and still kind towards others, you know? Like, for example, one of her stepsisters, Jacqueline, is actually kinder to her than her other stepsister and her stepmom. And Danielle acknowledges this. Like, Jacqueline is pardoned, you know, and Jacqueline sort of gets this moment where she also stands up for herself against her own mother. And she's really given that courage to do so because of Danielle and her courage. And I think it's awesome. You can totally see the way that Danielle's kindness and courage affects other people. And it's just inspirational. Because who wouldn't watch a character like that and be inspired to do better because of them, you know? And I already talked about the prince. Like, I think the prince was great because they gave him an arc. They actually made him interesting. It wasn't just the fact that he was sort of simping over this girl. Like, no, he didn't want to be king. He didn't want to marry the princess of Spain. He was trying to run away from his princely duties. Yet because of Danielle's inspiration, he is convinced to become a better king. He wants to open a university because of her, and he becomes a more kind man because of Danielle. And I think it's great. Honestly, like I said, if you've never watched the movie before, do it. And if you have watched the movie before, go watch it again. It's so good. You know that you're gonna love watching it again. And I think Danielle is a perfect example of a strong female character. And with Danielle and Cinderella, the thing that makes them strong females is the fact that they do not go against their morals. They stay true to themselves, to what they believe in being kind towards other people. And yes, you know, they get pushed around, they're abused, but they're aware that they are in an abusive household and that sometimes there's not much that you can do about your situation. But they do not shy away from taking the opportunity when it is given to them. They can see that small opening away from this abusive household and they seize their moment. A strong-willed character doesn't need to always be outspoken or witty or sassy or any of that, because the Cinderella in an animated version is not that. She's playful, she's kind, but she's not necessarily, you know, the Camila Cabello kind of sassy. Because that's not what makes a strong character. They are strong because of what they have been through and who they are. They have not let the circumstances of their life define how they treat others or how they act for the rest of their life. They continue to stay strong to their ideals and their morals, even though they are being abused in their house. The Cinderella character is not a damsel in distress. She is a victim, yes, but she is not a damsel in distress. She is not waiting around for her prince because she wasn't even wanting a prince. That was never her intent. The thing that makes Cinderella Cinderella isn't the fact that she is weak, because she's not. She's strong. It's the fact that she is able to be kind despite the circumstances. And I think that's what is so inspiring about Cinderella. I'm not gonna lie, this took a really long time to film. Longer than I wish it did, but here we are anyways. I hope you liked this video. I definitely enjoyed ranting and talking about my favorite parts and my least favorite parts, and just talking about all of this because, I don't know, I found it really fun to talk about and analyze stories and characters and plot types and archetypes. So if you have any other suggestions for what I should talk about next, it doesn't even have to be Disney related. It doesn't even have to be story related. Like, just give me something to talk about, and I can definitely talk about it. If you have any suggestions, please let me know. You know, you can always DM me on Instagram, or you are welcome to just comment. You know, I love to interact with you guys. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video for the mess that it is. And I will talk to you later. Bye!